All right, here we go. Okay, so if you've been following and tracking with us, today's case study is about trauma and trauma recovery. One of the things that Matt and I talked about in doing this case study is that the word trauma itself brings up kind of a very specific picture and thought and idea for people now. Maybe if you said trauma 50 years ago, it would mean something somewhat different. We just think about it differently now. Our goal today is to help you think about that word trauma in a very holistic way, because emotional and psychological trauma can lead to physical results or physical output, and vice versa. Physical injury, trauma can lead to emotional and psychological trauma, and all can manifest differently in the body. Nervous system awareness and training and assessment can make the difference in whether a person is labeled and dismissed, labeled and treated for something very specific that may or may not actually help them or not. So to me, today's case study is about recognizing that that word trauma kind of spans the mental, emotional, psychological world of who we are as humans. So let's get started.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the screen.
Certainly. All right. Thanks for being here, everybody. Those of you on the replays, we love you. Don't forget that. All right. Today we're doing regulating the nervous system. So this, like Kathy said, this presentation is kind of a case that hits both emotional trauma and physical trauma and the retraining that has to happen from each of those and how it can actually be combined. All right. So for today, I want you to meet Hannah. Some of you know Hannah already. She's a wonderful neuro trainer and lifestyle coach, and a good friend of ours as well. So in her case, we're going to give you a little history here. Her case that we're talking about today is kind of a snapshot of one piece of her life and history. Began when she was an adolescent or early teen. Basically, her parents were going through a separation and divorce, and Hannah was kind of thrust into the position of helping to support some other family members. She was the oldest of her siblings. There was some kind of swapping of family roles that occurred during this time because of the emotional distress and emotional trauma that was taking place. And she knew what was going on. And so kind of in front of other family and friends, in front of her siblings, she had to put on a good presentation, pretend everything was normal, and really become one of the adults, even though she was only, 11, 12, 13 as at the time these things were happening. Unfortunately, the pain of the family situation kind of weighed on her, and she began engaging in some unhealthy self-regulating behaviors and some controlling behaviors and habits around food. And that developed over a couple of years into quite a large kind of protective mechanism around food practices, and then culminated, and it even was exacerbated by a head trauma when she was in a skiing accident at age 16. So I don't have a picture of the skiing accident, but I'll let you look at the illustration and just imagine what happened here. Essentially, she went head over heels, and the right side of her head smashed into a rock in a riverbed, broke her helmet. Immediately after the accident, she had right side visual suppression, which means she wasn't able to see out of her right eye. Her entire right side of her body was bruised, and then essentially she had an untreated TBI. So this led to chronic headaches, visual and vestibular issues like motion sickness and nausea and disorientation, chronic SI pain, particularly on the right side, transient body pains. She's like, my shoulder hurts, my knee hurts, today my ankle hurts, now my neck hurts. And it just was pain that bounced around. And then GI dysfunction as a result of that as well. Combine that with the food regulation and self-regulating habits plus the dysfunction, and you get a big mess, basically. And I do want to make a quick note here. There is a very large correlation, quite often or quite frequent, between traumatic brain injury and GI dysfunction, gut issues. So if you haven't been in this neuro world very long, those two things often go together, where TBI can predicate the gut issues. It can also flip, where gut issues will predicate neural dysfunction. It can go both ways. So you often are probably going to face clients that have both of those things going on. So Hannah goes searching for answers, right? She was living in Germany at the time. She's now immigrated to the States. But in Germany, she pursued several options for getting rid of her pain and movement problems. Personal training certification. She did a medical fitness coaching certification. She did a 500-hour yoga certification. So she really put in the work. And this is actually one of the things I appreciate about Hannah. She's one of the most diligent clients that we've ever had. But it was in 2017 that she started neuro training. We met at a course that I was teaching, and she asked for a private training session. And at that time, what she wanted to work on was just pain relief. Okay. All these other things were going on with her nervous system, but she didn't even recognize that those things, that it was even be possible to change some of those things. Right? Like the nervous system dysregulation, and we'll talk about some of this that happened, but sympathetic tone was off. Breathing dysfunction was very prevalent. The chronic headaches, she didn't think those were going to go away. She basically wanted to do this first session because she was having SI pain and her shoulder was hurting, so she couldn't lift her arm. And it was one of those situations where she's like, well, at least if I could get some relief of this, maybe I can deal with some other stuff or just live with it. So basically this photo, the reason I put this one up, this is a photo from our very first training session where she was using her splits as a reassessment of how her nervous system was feeling overall. That was her range of motion assessment. Because she could do the splits, but currently because of the SI pain and the tightness in her body, she was probably 12 inches off the floor when we started this session. I can't convert inches to centimeters, so that's probably like 6,000 centimeters, but somewhere like, about this far off the floor. And within one session, she was all the way down. That's why she has the big smile on her face. So her nervous system was very responsive to neural inputs. But what happened is we figured out really quickly that it was not more activation she needed. It was really more inhibition that she needed. Okay. And this is another big takeaway when you're dealing with regulating the nervous system and trauma. Often inhibition is key, right? So let me walk you through her history a little bit, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that inhibition. So from 2017, for the next 3 years, Hannah was traveling back and forth between Germany, Denmark, and the US to pursue this neuro education, right? So we were seeing her multiple times a year. She was also building a business as a yoga instructor and then as a neuro trainer. But really her nervous system was getting the worst of it. The flights were really difficult for her nervous system. The time zone changes were really difficult. Being in a course for 4 days would leave her just completely depleted, kind of crashed on the other side. And then on a daily basis, she was still experiencing all of these things: dysautonomia, motion sickness, high levels of sympathetic activity. Like she would come in and she would go feel my hands, and her hands were freezing cold and dripping with sweat at the same time, literally dripping water off of her palms. Nausea, frequent headaches, high levels of anxiety. And then in amongst the midst of all of this travel and back and forth, her dog Frida also passed away. And so her dog had been kind of her anchor in some ways, which if you're in more of a trauma psychological world, they had a co-supportive relationship. But when Frida passed away, it really left Hannah without that anchor and without that way to regulate her nervous system. And then all of this stuff even flared even bigger. Okay. So what I mentioned before is that sometimes regulation starts with inhibition. So it's really important to give the nervous system a break from overstimulation, from unbalanced brain activity that it's kind of living with, especially after a TBI or after an emotional trauma. Your actual neural pathways and what are called neurotags can become very unbalanced. So giving a break from that, very important. And then also, it's important to give it a break from hyperactive threat responses. Keep in mind, the brain does not really differentiate between physical threats, emotional threats, and cognitive threats. The survival part of your brain doesn't know the difference. And so on a daily basis, even if it is or was an emotional threat trigger or emotional trauma, it still sets the brain and in these areas that we're going to talk about into a kind of a survival mode or high alert, and they become hyperactive to threats. So they're very, very reactive on an ongoing daily basis. They don't know how to calm themselves back down. So inhibition is one of the best tools that you can use to start to regulate the nervous system. All right, so I've listed here 6 different brain areas that are great targets for inhibition. And then in parentheses is kind of their responsibility. Why are they such a good target, right? The pons in the midbrain really set a lot of our sympathetic tone. So if I want to downregulate that, I may need to inhibit those areas. The amygdala is our threat response. So if I don't want to be hyper-reactive and perceiving threats where there are none, I need to calm down the amygdala. The thalamus is like the gatekeeper, deciding what gets to go into the cortex and what has to stay out. But when the thalamus becomes hypersensitive and passes too much information into the cortex, then the cortex doesn't know how to respond. It starts to become overstimulated, and it presents somewhat like someone who is a highly sensitive person. Okay. The hypothalamus is where your emotional responses become physical and your physical responses turn into emotions. It's like this cool translation area. It's also responsible for your adrenaline and cortisol dumping into your body from a top-down perspective. It needs to take a break sometimes. And then the last one there is insular cortex, right? Your sense of interoception. And really, there's a lot of associations that happen there. The associations between your visceral system, your vagus nerve, your vestibular system, your taste and smell, all your visceral organs, like all of these things that are not just movement related, but all the other stuff that the nervous system takes care of and integrates together, they really connect in that insular cortex. And when it is spun up and hyperactive, it can lead to a lot of these dysfunctions that we in the world, they're labeled as atypical or like not normal presentations. And the truth is the brain's not broken. It's not doing anything wrong. The brain's doing exactly what it's meant to do, but because of the inputs it's receiving or those brain activity patterns, it's leading to some deficits or some compensations. So all of that is to say, sometimes that regulation for your nervous system has to start with inhibition. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a physical trauma, emotional trauma, cognitive threats, or some other existential threat, we still may need inhibition first, okay? So Hannah's first big breakthrough was essentially activating her insular cortex and calming her vagus nerve. Her vagus nerve was way too active, and it was creating a lot of the nausea and sympathetic state. So we had to calm that baby down. So these are 4 different drills that she's doing here. The Z vibe in her ear is in the top left corner, bag breathing in the top right, vagus nerve tapping in the bottom right, ab belt with the yellow shirt on in the bottom left. She also used an acupressure pin on her stomach in order to just do this calming input to the vagus nerve and tell this thing to lower its activity. It was essentially running too hot. So we've already said there's a big connection between head trauma and gut vagus nerve dysfunction. So this is a great place to start when you're trying to regulate those things. So this big breakthrough is probably around 2018, about 1 year into the process. And I remember when she came back from Germany to the States, she came over to visit. She walked into the kitchen. She goes, "Look, feel my hands." And her hands were warm and dry. No more cold sweats. So these types of drills have greatly changed her sympathetic regulation to be able to get rid of that chronic issue, among other things. Okay. So that's a great place to start. The second one, big breakthrough. Oh, I forgot to hit that part. Whoops. Hold, please. Forgot I had one more point there. The specific things that she, other than the sweating hands, this also helped to relieve her motion sickness, her like daily nausea, and her anxiety. Okay. So those are the symptoms that I would strongly correlate with the insular cortex and vagus nerve dysfunction. And those were the ones that were helped in her case. Okay. Second big breakthrough is working on her midbrain and what's called the mesencephalon. So the mesencephalon and the midbrain, they're the same structure. They just kind of have two different names that they're referred to. Sits at the very top of the brainstem. Its primary job is to ask the question, based on the input I'm receiving, do I need a sympathetic response? Do I need to activate my sympathetic nervous system? And hers was always saying, yes, 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 yes. I always need to be sympathetically activated. I should never relax. And so inhibiting the mesencephalon became very, very important. So to do that, we used color glasses. You can see in the top image there, earplugs, typically plugging one ear, not both. Occlusion glasses, which is a tool that you create when you put a piece of Scotch tape or sellotape up across one part of the lens of your glasses. So either on the nasal side of the lens or on the temporal side of the lens out on the outside. There's a few variations, but those are a great one to kind of calm down this part of the brain, using heating packs on her stomach or her low back and wearing compression clothing. So getting a little bit more baroreception and compression into the body rather than being overstimulated by light touch. You know, things that are like loose clothing or things that are gently touching your skin can be irritating or misinterpreted as if it's something dangerous, where compression clothing can bring a sense of safety for some people. So those tools created a second huge breakthrough. And that essentially helped to calm down the final parts of sympathetic dysregulation she was having, reduced her headaches, so she no longer had daily headaches, reduced her body pain, and took out her anxiety. Okay. So because of this process and these tools, this is a picture of Hannah going through a major certification. It's a week-long certification, multiple days, loud music, bright flashing lights, 1,000 people in the room, long hours without breaks for food, right? Imagine trying to sit through something like that where she started. It would never have happened. So not only was this a huge accomplishment for her business and the training she received, but also a huge accomplishment for her nervous system. So she did multiple of these certifications, and she always had her tools with her, right? She used them as much as she needed. She'd be sitting in the middle of the presentation wearing her orange glasses and wearing an earplug and putting on her ab belt, doing some breathing drills. But it wasn't about the appearance. It was about the fact that she had the ability to regulate her nervous system from emotional trauma or distress, from physical stress, and to lower those threat levels so that she could be there and be present. So today, here's Hannah. She's now running a very successful lifestyle coaching business, teaching other people the neuro tools, mindset coaching, and the emotional healing work that she's mastered over the last 9 years or so. And she really specializes in nervous system regulation. That's her number one thing. Habit change as well, and then also bringing clarity into people's lives. So big congratulations to Hannah, and I'm going to let you step back in.
So from a key takeaways perspective, I hope that right about in the middle of this talk, if you go back and you listen to it, one of the comments that Matt made is that the nervous system doesn't differentiate between physical, emotional, psychological trauma. It will give an output. And that's one of the most important things you have to realize. Hannah's one of those people. And let me back up for a second. I was going to say 5 years ago, but 10 years ago, nobody was talking about really the body holistically from a nervous system perspective. And so it doesn't matter if trauma enters the body emotionally, psychologically, physiologically, spiritually. It doesn't matter how it gets there. They may show up on your doorstep with a whole host of added on and stacked on pieces, almost like a ball of thread all wound up. Hannah kind of stepped onto our doorstep from I have this pain and this pain. Can you help me with them? as you can see in one session, it was possible to get her into the splits and alleviate the pain and let her body relax. But imagine if we had left her there, right? Over the course, I have the deepest level of respect for Hannah because of her intentionality. And we have so many clients like you. We have so many clients that are like this. But in Hannah's young life, she had been labeled as fragile. What else did I write down? She wasn't strong. She was sensitive. She needed extra care. She couldn't, when in reality, it was quite the opposite. She was extremely strong and extremely resilient and extremely dedicated to her own health and well-being. But each professional that she was sent to worked on just a little part of the health and didn't take a look at the whole. In our world today, I've said this for years, life is a full contact sport. And it's a full contact sport, whether it's an emotional trauma that hits us, whether it's a physical trauma or a psychological trauma that hits us. I believe that our job as health and wellness professionals is to actually determine when someone comes to you and they're asking for help, what are they saying versus what are they not saying? In Hannah's case, there was a lot that she had been labeled and told all of her life that, oh, if you just fix this, you'll fix that. Oh, if you just do this, it'll take care of that. Someone needed to look at all of her and all of her output and all of her nervous system and let her brain know in multiple areas she was okay. She was safe. And in the areas she didn't have a tool, we needed to provide a tool that gave her body the information it was lacking, right? Because again, most of these people that come to us, by the time people get to you, they're not fragile. They have spent their entire lives fighting to come through and come out okay, right? And it's our job to give them the tools to help reset that nervous system and allow them to achieve at the levels that they're capable of. So hopefully from this, you can kind of think about whether someone comes to me from an emotional place, a physical place, a psychological place, no matter where the threat has come from, do you have the tools it takes to evaluate them as a whole person? Do you have what it takes to care for them and get to the bottom of what they need and what they're asking for? So kind of to me, that's our big takeaway today in this case study is, can we look at people as a whole and can we give them what they need to get better and get well? I'm thinking you might have, did you have an announcement?
I have 3 announcements.
Okay, I thought so.
Let me jump back in here.
I could sense it.
Yeah. Three announcements real quick here. First of all, next case study is on Monday, right? We have one more in the series. And if you've already been registering or putting in your email, you don't have to go back and register again. You're already on the list. Just put it on your calendar. You'll automatically get the emails because you're already registered. So that's on Monday, same time, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. Second announcement is we talked about last time how the mentorship is opening up in November. And if you're at all interested in learning about the details of that, how it could help you professionally, the pricing, the timing, logistics, just reply to any of the emails we've sent you and say, tell me more. And then we'll give you the details that you need to know. Third announcement, you may have seen this in the emails. I haven't talked about this yet, but on the day after our last case study, so our last one is Monday, that means on Tuesday, October 17th, we're doing a big giveaway for the people who have gone into the Facebook group and commented, giving your biggest takeaways, your questions, your thoughts, all right? So this is kind of like a cool little fun thing. It's just a bonus, no strings attached. But we're going to meet on Zoom and we're going to try to do Facebook Live at the same time. Got to get our technology figured out. But we're going to give away some of our training products, some of our programs, and some next level neuro gear, physical stuff that will actually ship to you. So mark it on your calendars if you haven't already. Tuesday, October 17th, 12:30 p.m. We're doing a Zoom party, and it's going to be a giveaway for those who have participated in the case study. All right. Just want to say thank you for your time and being here with us and prompting with questions and comments. So that's how we want to say thank you to the community, is by having a Zoom party on October 17th.
All right. This is the first time that we have managed to run through the case study, kind of give you some key takeaways and points. do you have any comments, any questions, or any thoughts that you want to talk about, or in the chat? Since we have just a few minutes, if there's anything, please feel free to raise your hand, say me, etc., etc. This will just be our bonus few minutes extra. One of the things that I have said, and feel free to start typing. One of the things that I've said since doing this is that we want to use these case studies as an opportunity for you to go, well, wait, what would I have done in this case? Or do I have clients like that? Do I have people that have come to me for one thing, but it really seems like there's more going on in their world that they maybe need help with? Do I have the tools to help them? I hope that the case studies kind of give you information, but they also give you a way to go, oh, would I have tried that with Hannah? In today's talk, for example, one of the key things that I would also like you to take away is that inhibition is often the primary starting place with brain-body issues. Oftentimes, people come to health professionals and they get a lot more activation. Hannah was so sympathetically dominant, as are several of my current clients. They're so sympathetically overwhelmed that the last thing they need is more activation. They need someone to go, it's okay. You can slow down a moment. It's okay. You're not in danger. The lion is not going to catch you today. You can take a nap, right? And so and I'll share this with you. I very recently just went through this myself after having COVID again and wondering why. And again, I haven't had it a lot. I've had it twice in the 3 years, right? But having my body suddenly become dysregulated and having my body respond to everything as if it's threatening, it was an opportunity for me to practice what I teach and go back to using earplugs, ab belt, glasses, some of the basic things to turn the world that we live in down, right? Because my intuition was to do the opposite. Okay, I just need to get back to, I need to do this more. I need to do this more. I need to do this more. We're so conditioned to do more when in reality, what my brain and body needed were less, not more.
Yeah. Great question from Katie in the chat. Let me talk about this. She said, with inhibition tools, do you find clients need them less over time, or are they kind of always necessary to keep regulated? It's typically the former. They need them less over time. But like if you were to follow Hannah on Instagram, she posts all the time about still using her neuro drills. It's now 3 years since she had these big changes. She uses neuro drills every day, but it doesn't mean that she has to use inhibition every day, right? So what happens is your overall neuro training becomes a little bit more like brain hygiene, like the same way that you brush your teeth every day and you shower. You're going to do brain drills at some level to maintain and continue working on those neural pathways. But Hannah probably only has to pull up the inhibition tools if she has a particularly stressful week, or there's something kind of crazy going on, like she goes to a major conference, or she has a really long flight or something like that. But on a day-to-day basis, she's not necessarily inhibiting all the time. So you do progress out of the inhibition drills into more kind of a ongoing maintenance state, and then you just still have them in your toolbox if you need them.
And that may be going from using the tools every hour for long periods of time. And like, I love neurohygiene is a word that I think everyone should own. If I brush my teeth, I do vision drills every day. If I brush my teeth, I do balance drills every day. And that's not an if, that's because I do. These are part of my hygiene activities in a day. My toothbrush runs for 2 minutes. I often restart it because I don't know why I like to, but 2 minutes a day of my teeth also includes 1 to 2 minutes of vision, 1 to 2 minutes of balance, 1 to 2 minutes of breathing. Those become that hygiene that we talk about. So yeah, you move from inhibition to decreased inhibition to specific activation over time.
Yeah, awesome. All right, we're at time.
All right, we will see you all Monday. If you have questions, besides letting us know if you're interested in the mentorship, if you have questions about the case study, or if you have clients that you feel like, oh, I could use a little more information or help with this, feel free to respond to those emails and ask us questions about how would we maybe proceed or what would we do in some of these cases. If it's helpful for us to help you, let us know.
All right. Thanks for being here, everybody.
See you Monday.
Bye-bye.